Howdy folks, welcome to the channel. So, for those of you guys who've been asking about the Turbo Civic, wondering where the heck's the damn turbo on this thing, well, I want to give you guys a little update. So, I just ordered the wideband O2 sensor and a couple of the amp super seal pins that I need for the Haltech connector. Those should be here in just a couple days, and at that point we can get started rolling on the turbo build. So the first thing I want to do before we switch over to the turbo is I want to get this thing running on the standalone ECU, just NA. I want to make sure I can get everything going, get it all running and ripping on the standalone ECU without the turbo setup. And then once I know all the kinks are worked out, we'll get the turbo on there. But for now, we can start knocking out little things that we can do that we will still be able to drive the car in stock form, but they'll help move us along with the turbo build, kind of like the exhaust and getting this intercooler mounted up. Getting the drain bung drilled in the oil pan, stuff like that. Today, what I want to do is I want to get the transmission swapped in this thing. So when I first put the engine back together and got this thing up and running, I had it going with a VTEC transmission. The transmission that came with the car, this is a non-VTEC car. Transmission that came with the car had a bad input shaft bearing, so while I was waiting on parts for that, I wanted to be able to drive this car around. So I found a transmission for a VTEC D-Series engine and swapped that in here. There's no differences really between the transmissions other than the gearing. However, I wanted to feel the difference between the two transmissions, so I swapped back to the original transmission that was in the car, the non-VTEC transmission. And let me tell you what, guys, it feels a lot slower. So what I want to do today is I want to switch back to the VTEC transmission because based off the old butt dyno, the gearing in that transmission makes it feel a lot quicker. So we're going to swap transmissions back, but before we do that, I want to do a couple of test runs so we can see some real numbers that show us the difference between these two transmissions. So I'm going to do a couple 5 mile an hour to 60 miles an hour runs. And I'm not going to do 0 to 60 because I want to rule out the launch. And then I want to do a couple of 20 to 60 mile an hour in second gear pulls. We'll see what we get on the non-VTEC transmission. We'll swap it over. I'll show you guys how to do that. And then we'll see what the numbers are on the VTEC transmission. I have a feeling we're going to be quite a bit faster on just the transmission swap. So let's do that. So in second gear, we are at, let's hold it at 30 miles an hour here and see what RPM we're at. Second gear, 30 miles an hour is just over 3,000 RPM. I'd say like 3,200 RPM. All right, let's push it up to 60 here real quick. I'm gonna go foot to the floor once this gets down to 30. Jesus Christ, that's a cop right there. All right, I didn't get pulled over, but we are going to find a new spot to go do some pulls. It's not like I was going crazy fast, but the speed limit there was like 40 and I was doing 60, so 20 over is definitely not a good ticket. I think I was doing like 58. We'll have to review the footage there. Hold it at 30. What if we pass another cop? This block's getting kind of hot, as the kids say, so I think I'll just head home. I think I probably got enough data. We're getting started pulling this transmission out. So far, all we've done is taken the tires off, brake caliper and caliper bracket, and then I'm getting these tie rod and upper ball joints out of the way so I can pop the axles out of the transmission. Then from there it'll be pretty much smooth sailing, just pulling bolts out and dropping this transmission out. Okay, now we'll pop off the axle nut. It's going to be 1.25 inches. Hey guys. Alrighty, now I can climb under here, take my handy dandy pry bar, and just pop these axles out. Sometimes it can be easier said than done, but hang on, show them what you're prying on so they don't pry on the wrong shit, because these are kind of finicky. I just got my tip in between there, and then I'm just prying against the case here. And then I like to rotate it. There we go. It's usually what it is, pry both sides opposite. Cool, both axles are out now. Now I'll remove this inspection window, and then we're pretty much clear to start pulling this transmission out. It's gonna be the 2 motor mount, or the transmission mount bolts up top, and then the one in the back. And then we have just the bell housing bolts, and that's it. Oh, and then also the shift linkage. I'll do the shift linkage real quick right now. Okay, I just pulled the clutch slave cylinder off right here. And then I disconnected a couple of the connectors, like the reverse sensor and the speed sensor. Those are the only 2 connectors attached to this transmission. Brother's on there working on the inspection window. Then we'll get a jack underneath this thing and make sure the engine is supported. And then we can start taking the bell housing and motor mount bolts out. Need to make sure the engine's supported because there's only 1 motor mount on that side that's going to be left holding it in. So we just want to have something underneath the engine keeping it held up.
That's probably bugs me.
Right there.
It's just so small. It's like a lawnmower, dude.
Jeez, okay.
What the fuck was that?
Forgot to disconnect the battery.
I mean, what'd you disconnect to make it spark like that?
Oh, I just arced the
Ground.
arced it on the starter lug. Hell yeah, brother. Oil pan off. Fantastic. That is fantastic. Let's feel some of these. So check this out. We definitely have some side-to-side play, which makes quite a bit of noise. I mean, all of them have a lot of side-to-side play, which is pretty noisy. But when I try to hold it up to one side so it can't wiggle side to side at all, and then wiggle it up and down, like in the knock direction, it doesn't do it. But I mean, that's freaking pretty damn noisy. I mean, I don't see a ton of glitter in there or anything. What's up? What? So I pulled the rod cap off on this cylinder right here. Crankshaft looks good under there. I'll show you guys the other side here in just a second. But I wanted to check and make sure that all these look good because of that knock noise that I'm getting. And initially, I saw that they all have quite a bit of side-to-side play. And that kind of freaked me out a little bit, as well as the crankshaft. I can move the whole crankshaft back and forth just slightly, like a I don't know. So I called my boys up at D&D Machine and asked them what they think about that. They said the side-to-side play is totally normal. You need to have that. But I don't know. Everything looks good so far, so I don't know where this knock noise is coming from. But I mean, thankfully, so far, it does not seem like it's coming from the rotating assembly. So here's that cap that I was talking about. Those little light scratches are literally just from my fingernail. Like, look, I can Scratch it up a little bit. You see that little scratch right there? So they're more scuffs really than scratches. But anyway, this rod cap and bearing look totally fine. I see nothing on that really concerns me, so I pulled off the rest of them. They all pretty much look like this, so I'm gonna just go ahead and put these back on and run them. And we'll search for that knock sound somewhere else. I'm gonna say it's not the rod bearings. So we'll put these back on, torque it to 55 pounds, and then we're good to go. We'll drill our hole in our oil pan. Okay, so from what I can tell, it looks like the safest place to position that bung is gonna be right here, where this is going to be right here in between these two bolt holes. So I'll just try to line it up in between these two, this stud hole and this bolt hole right here. So it ends up poking out right at this part of the girdle and doesn't hit any part of the crankshaft. All right, that looks pretty good. She's nice and tight. Not going to leak probably. So I'll scrape this old gasket material off this oil pan and we'll get her back in there. So here you go. The way you can tell these two transmission parts in the VTEC transmissions will always have a stamp right there with a B000. See the B000 right there? Whereas the non-VTECs, this one's a little dirty, so you might just have to take my word for it. If we could focus, have A000. You can see right there, there's an upside down A. And that's the only difference. This one also says K4F on the sticker, whereas this one says E5F, but I don't know. I don't know if that's a consistent thing between all the VTEC versus non-VTECs, but the B000 is always going to be the VTEC transmission. So look out for that. And we'll fish it up in there. Actually, I'm going to make sure real quick that there's no little bits of debris. Make sure there's no little bits of debris. Bits of debris in this oil pan. All right, so as you can see, one thing I failed to consider is the fact that the drain plug is going to be pointing right at the flange right here. So this probably won't matter when we get the turbo on here because it's going to dump in a different spot. But as of right now, I mean, obviously this thing is just right in the freaking way. So we'll just put a cap on there for now. Obviously, it needs to have a cap on there anyway until we get the turbo all plumbed up. But let's get these bolts for this oil pan nice and tight. Since all those bearings looked okay on those, since all those rod bearings looked okay, I called my boys down at D&D and asked for their advice to see what they think. And they were saying that even, you know, since I have good oil pressure the whole time, there's no way I could have a bad bearing. If I had low, you know, if I had a bad bearing, it would drop the oil pressure. So since I always have good oil pressure when it happens, they were leaning more towards that it might be detonation, which I guess I could believe. You know, it's a pretty low compression engine, but could be detonating. Why not? So they asked me if I have a decent timing light, and I said no, because the truth is I don't. I have a terrible timing light. It's just the cheapest one I could find. And they told me to come down. Big shout out to my boys at D&D Machine, because they told me to come down and use their timing light. They have a nice one, and they did not have to do that. They told me to come down and use it for free. So I very much appreciate that. These don't need to be crazy tight. Just tight enough to where it doesn't leak. You see I'm not holding the end of the wrench right here because I can get a lot more leverage on the wrench like that. Just kind of holding it in the middle there, so kind of reduces my leverage. Dials in my torque rating there. Alright, we got everything prepped and ready to go here. Just gonna get this transmission set back into place. No big deal. No big deal. I'm kind of a G. Should have dropped that fucker on your toes. It's recording. Alright. Grab on. Okay, you're good. Step it out. Ow.
Do you want me to hit your calipers too while I'm here?
Hit the what?
There's a little grease fitting on your calipers too. You want me to hit it while
That's
I'm
a
here?
bleeder nut for the...
Oh, I'm fucking stupid.
Now the question is going to be, do I have enough transmission fluid to fill this thing up? New transmission's all hooked up and installed. Let's go see what this thing can do. All right, there. We'll just hold it at 15. I don't know, man. That transmission definitely feels faster. All right, this ain't perfectly flat, but you know what? It's flat enough. We'll hold it at 10 miles an hour here, and then we'll take off. Yeah, that was definitely a slight uphill. And then we'll do we'll just do a launch right here. Get straightened out as much as possible. And here we go. Spun really bad. All right, I gotta stop and get some caffeine. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
How you feel today?
Oh, a lot better, dude. I was freaking sick. I had a sore throat.
Oh yeah, I know. Lots of people, including me.
Yeah, did you get sick too?
Yeah, it's like a shot. It's get over with it months ago. He came back, and now he just recover again. Shit.
Yeah, I had a sore throat for like 4 or 5 days. Today's the first day I feel really good.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Alrighty, my friend.
All right, take care.
See you next time.
All right.
Well, listen, guys, I haven't looked at the data yet. I'm gonna go back home and I'm just gonna do it all. Goodness, this car's freaking loud. All right, so I haven't done any kind of timing or anything while I was doing any of this filming, but when I get back home and I'm editing this video, I'll add a timer in and I'll figure out exactly how fast it was and do it all in the editing software. And we'll hopefully be able to figure out exactly which setup is faster. To be honest, it's been a couple of weeks, you know, it wasn't back to back, so hopefully the runs that I was able to get today match up closely enough with the runs I did on the previous transmission to where we can get some good solid data. But I at least did a 0 to 60 or a 10 to 60 on this transmission, and I can get the 10 to 60 from the other transmission. So we should be able to figure all that stuff out pretty quick. What I can tell you for sure though, is that based off the old butt dyno, this transmission feels a lot better. I like the gearing in it a lot better. It makes the car feel way faster. So I don't know if the gearing necessarily makes it faster, but it sure does feel that way. So like I said, we'll crunch the numbers and we'll figure this out for sure. Guys, I just wanted to show you this from inthefastlane.com. You can see here, these are tables that show the gearing for the 5th and 6th generation Honda Civic transmissions. So you can actually see what the real gearing is for the transmission that we're talking about today. So this is the VTEC transmission that we swapped in the car, and this is the non-VTEC transmission that was in there already. And if you look at 1st through 3rd gear, you can see a big difference in the gearing. So 1st gear is 325 on all of them. 2nd gear on the original transmission was 1.782. Whereas 2nd gear on the VTEC transmission is 1.909. And then again, we have 3rd gear, which is, we have 3rd gear at 1.172 and then 3rd gear at 1.25. And then once we get into 4th and 5th gear, they're both the same at 0.909 and 0.702. And then also the final drive ratio is different on both of them. For the coupe, which is what we have, is 4.058. Whereas on the VTEC transmission down here, we can see it's 425 for the final drive ratio. So there you go. Those are the actual differences between the transmissions. So if you're trying to decide on one or the other, there's that information for you right there at inthefastlane.com. It's all right there. 5th, 6th generation. It's got all the D-series transmissions listed out here. And not all these are interchangeable though. 5th and 6th generation will swap over but you can't put a 7th generation on a 6th generation Honda. Alrighty folks, so I crunched the numbers and I have the results here, as you can see. But first, real quick, I want to just mention a couple things. So first, at the beginning I said that I was going to do like 5 or 10 miles an hour to 60 mile an hour pulls. While I was doing the editing, I realized it'd be a lot easier and more consistent to start the timer at 20 miles an hour and stop the timer at 55 miles an hour. So that's what you're gonna see in the video. So one thing that might look a little bit weird when you're watching the video back is that the timer only goes to 30 milliseconds before it clicks over to the next second. That's because the way the software works, I filmed this video at 30 frames per second, so it only has 30 frames to count before it can switch over to the next second. So it looks kind of funky, but it's easy enough to do the math, and that's what these times are. They're converted over. That's why these times might look a little bit different than what you see in the video. Secondly, I'm obviously not a professional driver, so there's a lot of room for error in my shifts and in my launches and stuff like that. So take all these times with a grain of salt. I'm not a pro. And lastly, it's important to note that the VTEC transmission does not reach 60 miles an hour in second gear. The non-VTEC transmission gets to about 64, 65 miles an hour in second gear. That's where it tops out at. The VTEC transmission takes one more shift. You have to be in third gear in order to hit 60 miles an hour. So like I said, that's why I decided to cut the test stop at 55 miles an hour in the times, but I'll also give you the times all the way up to 60 miles an hour. I recorded that as well. Here's the results. 20 to 60, the VTEC times, or the B000 transmission, are all in purple, and the non-VTEC times are all in blue. So here we can see 20 to 60, first run to first run, we're almost a second faster with the VTEC transmission. And then on the second run, I believe we were going uphill on this run, but we were a little bit slower. We were like 0.8 of a second slower, so quite a bit slower. Now this is that same run right here, but ending the timer at 55 miles an hour. So you can see here the results are pretty much the same, but we're about a second faster to 55. So if you exclude that shift, and then as you can see right here, these two numbers are a lot closer. We're only 0.2 of a second slower when you get rid of that shift. And again, we were going uphill on the second run in the VTEC transmission. The 0 to 60 times, I just did one of those, so it's not really great. However, we could see that we were in fact faster. Even with an additional shift, we were faster on the VTEC transmission. And again, from 0 to 55, when you get rid of that shift, we were a whole lot faster on the VTEC transmission. So in conclusion, what do I think? If you can shift pretty quick and you're a good driver, or even a relatively good driver, you're good at shifting and good at launching and stuff like that, you can definitely get better times in the VTEC transmission. The gearing in the VTEC or the B000 transmission makes it feel a lot torqueier. The whole goal of that transmission is to keep the car in VTEC. You start off in first gear, you hit VTEC, ring it all the way out, and then you shift to second gear, you drop down, and you're still in a high enough RPM range to stay in VTEC. So you never drop out of VTEC and then have to hit it again. Whereas the non-VTEC transmission is only set up for fuel economy. The main goal of that transmission is to keep you at the lowest RPM for any given speed. So it makes sense that the VTEC transmission is a lot quicker. I think in the real world, the VTEC transmission is probably gonna end up being faster, because you gotta think about almost all manual transmission cars are gonna have to shift right either just before, or just after 60 miles an hour. So we will have already shifted gears and we will already be back in boost by the time that the people who have to shift after 60 miles an hour have started their shift. So I think in the real world, the VTEC transmission would probably be a little bit quicker, but again, that's just my personal opinion, and that's what I think from the data that I was able to get. Again, not a professional. Alrighty folks, that's all for today. We got a lot done, from swapping these transmissions out to pulling that oil pan off and checking all those bearings out, and then getting that oil drain bung for the turbo stuck into the oil pan. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm gonna leave Amazon links down in the description for all the tools and parts that I used in this video. By the way, we got a lot more Honda videos coming out soon. I got a ton of footage on this Honda. All I need to do is get it all edited up and get it out to you guys. So stick around for that. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.